ο Doru Frantescu, νομίζω είμαστε τυχεροί που τον έχουμε σήμερα έστω εξ αποστάσεως μαζί μας. Είναι ένα πρόσωπο, ένας expert reference στις Βρυξέλλες και νομίζω ότι πρέπει να τον εκμεταλλευτούμε με φιδό φυσικά και ευγένεια, γιατί είναι το τέλος της εβδομάδος. Έχει μια παρουσίαση να μας κάνει και βεβαίως μπορείτε να... Δεν ξέρω, έχουμε συνδεθεί. Ωραία. Θα τον δούμε στην οθόνη. Okay. Now, hi Doru. We cannot hear you.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, Doru. Loudly.
Perfect.
Good. So this is our last session, Doru, of a two-day forum. This is the AGORA First Corporate Affairs Forum. And I think it is like it is a kind of cherry on the cake because we have the privilege to have with us a real EU affairs expert and strategic communications expert who at the same time is a very successful and creative digital entrepreneur who claims himself as a proud European citizen. Correct, Doru?
That is very correct indeed.
Okay. So, dear Doru Frantescu, thank you so much. We are happy and privileged to have you with us today. The latest achievement in his more than 20 years entrepreneurial adventure is the creation of a one-of-a-kind international organization which provides unique insights to citizens across the European Union and beyond. It is about Vote Watch Europe, which has become a worldwide recognized institution used by hundreds of experts every day. Doru, as a real EU policy expert, will provide us today with insights into the key trends, political developments and legislative files dominating the EU agenda in the second semester of 2023. We will listen to you with great interest, although it is the end of the forum and the end of the week, while Stevi Yosif will make the comments at the end of the presentation and will also address to you for your potential questions and comments. Doru, is it okay? 20, 30 minutes for your presentation?
Yeah.
Good.
Understood.
You have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation and then for your kind words. I will try to make this still enjoyable to you. I'm realizing that probably I'm staying between you and lunch. I'm also not seeing the audience. I'm just seeing your podium. Now I can see the audience. Excellent. So that I can also see your reactions. What I've been asked to do and what I will be doing is to talk about the European agenda for the remaining part of the year. I will touch upon some of the files that are still pending across the dossiers. I will talk a little bit about energy, a little bit about health, environment, transportation, digital agenda, so that you get a feeling of where things are in Brussels, because there is a lot going on. There is a lot going on, and I can tell you from the beginning that the message that President of the European Commission, Madame von der Leyen, has sent to the Commission, to the College of Commissioners, and to, let's say, through them, everyone in Brussels, is that there will be legislative production until the very last day of this European Commission, yes? Which is not necessarily usual, because in the various political cycles that we've had before us, the Commission usually towards the autumn of the year before the European elections, it was stopping legislative production and it was preparing simply for the next political cycle. This is not going to be the case now. The signals that we're getting from von der Leyen is that there will be legislative production, so there will be legislation being proposed by this Commission to the very last day of the Commission. Why? Because the very last day of this European Commission will probably not coincide with the end of the von der Leyen era at the European Commission. So probably this is just the first of at least 2 mandates for von der Leyen. That's why it is likely that the next European Commission will not be very different from this one. So there will be some sort of continuation. This is why this Commission is more brave, and we are likely to see a lot still being proposed between now and the European elections. That is as a matter of introduction. Now, I will start with energy, because energy has been a big topic in Brussels in general, but even more so since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There has been a lot being discussed. I will just mention a few files that are important and that there are where there are debates, or we find contention points where either the governments disagree between them, or there is disagreement between big political families in the European Parliament. One of them is the Renewable Energy Directive, which is currently blocked by France, because France wants this file to include incentives for nuclear energy. One of the big debates in Brussels is to what extent nuclear energy is or should be considered as a part of the solution for the renewable energy plans for the next decades. France, as a big producer of nuclear energy, wants very favorable condition for the production of nuclear energy. This is why they're blocking this directive at the very last moment, even after an interinstitutional agreement between Commission, Parliament, and Council was reached. This is very unusual, but it has become more often lately. Germany also did it when it was about the combustion engines, that at the very last moment, after an agreement was reached, Germany changed their mind and said they would be blocking the proposal. That is to say that things are getting tougher in Brussels, and negotiations are getting more difficult than they used to be. This is another message that I want to send from the very beginning, that we're seeing bigger cleavages, tougher political debates between the governments, but also between the political families. So more political competition. That means tougher negotiations, longer negotiations, but at least we have more transparency, and there is a more democratic debate, which can actually be helpful both for the citizens, but also for the stakeholders who know where politicians stand, where governments stand, and at least they know if something is blocked, they know who is blocking it, and they know whom to talk to in order to unblock things, or who to talk to make their voices heard. So that is to say that the EU decision-making process is becoming more transparent and more democratic, and at the same time more competitive. Now, other pieces of legislation that are ongoing in Brussels are, one of them is about energy performance of buildings. This is by far the most disputed energy file, because a coalition of 17 countries led by Italy and Poland want that residential houses to be removed from this law, so that the law doesn't cover the residential houses and just cover the businesses. But this is something that the parliament doesn't want. So there's a dispute between the parliament on the one hand, and let's say a coalition of 17 member states on the other hand. There is many other directives and regulations, some of them that concern gas and the role of low carbon hydrogen. So along nuclear, the other source of energy which is controversial is the low carbon hydrogen, and whether this is a solution to the renewable energy for the next few decades. This is still something that hasn't been decided and will have to be decided in the negotiations between various stakeholders at European level. Let's see what else we have. Let's go to transportation, which is also related to energy. Now, one file which may be quite familiar to you, because this is historic, is the Euro standards for the cars. Now we are at Euro 7, and unlike the previous Euro standards for the emissions from the cars, this regulation is different, because it aimed initially to introduce limitations for the emissions of particles that come from brakes and tires, not only from the fuel, but also from the brakes and the tires of the cars. So initially, the Commission wanted to propose such limitations. This was supported by part of the Parliament, but then it became very controversial. So that's why this file is for now blocked at the committee stage in the European Parliament. In particular, we have the EPP, so the center-right political forces that are blocking this file, saying that it is too ambitious, and a coalition of Central and Eastern European member states who also say that this is going too far. Also, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the agri-food legislation, because this is also a hot topic in Brussels at the moment. There is a big cleavage between those who want bigger agricultural production in the EU and who lay emphasis on food security. They say that also, given the more difficult geopolitical conditions around the world, the EU should produce more food internally and should ensure that it has its own supply, that it does not depend on other countries, and therefore the farmers should be more supported. So on the one hand, and others who are the pro-environmentalists who want to make the production of food very, let's say, limitative and to put the emphasis on environmental concerns, which goes against, let's say, the lobby of the farmers. So there is a big cleavage between these two camps, and now the difference that we're seeing from previous years is, however, that there is a big pushback from the lobby that supports, let's say, the farmers because of the changing geopolitical conditions. What we are noticing is that the European People's Party political family and some of the other parties to the right of the political spectrum have become much more supportive of the position of the agricultural producers and are pushing back, let's say, what they perceive as too ambitious environmental proposal that can become very limitative. That can make life too hard for the production of food internally.
Doru, can you hear me? Doru?
Please.
It's Andreas. Is there any pharma or telecoms or what else, perhaps financial services files? I think there is people here who are interested in these files, so I would propose that perhaps you focus on them, if you don't mind.
Yes, good. Of course, I have the information about all the sectors. I'll jump to health, therefore. Health is big. There is the reform of the pharmaceutical package, which has just been proposed by the Commission, and it is now in the early stages in the European Parliament. I don't need to tell you, this is very big. There are some contention points that we have already identified there. We're talking about intellectual property, especially for medicines that deal with rare diseases. We're talking about the market, the period for market exclusivity for orphan medicines. And we're talking about the new requirements that need to be fulfilled for an extension of the period of market exclusivity. These are the points where there are very different views between the political families. Those on the left are usually more regulatory oriented. They're not very supportive of intellectual property rights or strong intellectual property rights, whereas the center right is usually pushing for stronger protection of intellectual property rights for the pharma producers. So we can expect big fights between these two camps. There is also the issue of the approach to antimicrobial resistance, as well as the public intervention in the markets to ensure supply security, and the environmental aspects of the proposal are also contention points. These proposals have not been very welcomed by the producers of pharma products, as you can imagine. And these producers are also backed by the European People's Party in particular, and some other parties towards the center and center-right of the political spectrum in the European Parliament. Where, in terms of concrete proposals, these are called the Directive on Medicinal Products for Human Use, and there is a regulation. So there's a directive and a regulation. The regulation is called on the authorization and supervision of medicinal products for human use. Both of these, as I said, they are at the early committee stage in the European Parliament. This is important because, as you know, in lobbying, the earlier you get involved, the better. So this is still in early stages. There are still a couple of other proposals in the health area. The patent licensing package, which deals, as the name says, with patents. This is also at the early stage in the European Parliament. And the other one is the European Health Data Space, a very big regulation which deals with the collection and sharing of data. The big remaining contention point is there, that of secondary use of health data. So how this data should be used for other purposes than what it was initially collected for. So this is one point where we're seeing the Parliament still divided. I think you asked me to talk about digital as well. Am I right? So I'll say about digital, we are seeing an increasing number of legislative proposals that regulate the digital sphere, and this will continue to be the case for the entire decade. The Data Act is almost finalized. There is one issue remaining there on how to regulate the data sharing between businesses and between businesses and customers. One other controversial proposal regards the political advertising. There are still negotiations on the extent that the political parties can use targeted political advertisement. So this has to be dealt with obviously before the European elections, because we're almost starting the campaign. There is the Artificial Intelligence Act, which regulates the artificial intelligence, but which we still need to be seeing how the biometric recognition is going to be dealt with. There we're seeing the EPP pushing for a softer approach, whereas the left in the parliament is pushing for the banning of biometric identification. Last but not least, there is also the Platform Workers Directive. This regards platforms such as Uber, where no compromise has been reached so far. This deals a lot with the way the drivers of these platforms should be considered, whether freelancers or employees. Right. There may be other areas which you want me to touch upon, such as trade or
telecoms, or technology.
Technology. Well, the other big file in the or debate in telecommunications and digital is, as probably you know, whether the big digital giants, especially the American ones, should share the burden of developing telecommunication networks in Europe. There we have a big lobby battle between these on the one hand and the European telecom, let's say, entities on the other hand, and this is something that we can expect to last for quite some time until the end of this term. The European institutions have traditionally tried to regulate the American digital giants as much as possible, but many concerns have to be taken into account. We're still dealing with companies that are headquartered in an allied country, so there is always this consideration that needs to be taken into account, not to overdo it. Let's see, what else?
It's been a long time I haven't heard that there is any tobacco file in the horizon.
There doesn't seem to be in the immediate future. However, there will be next year. So from what I know on this side, we can expect regulation for the tobacco sector next year. So you should be pending, you should be staying informed and even prepare already, because as I said earlier, and I think this is basic knowledge, the earlier you prepare for such battles, the better. How can you prepare? By collecting intelligence. And now that we are at this part, and from what I could understand from your previous discussion, the data analytics was mentioned there as a source of as a best practice example. I'm trying to share my screen to show you how we provide this data analytics. And as soon as I find the right way to do it, I'll do it. Can you see my screen now? Can you see my screen? Yeah. Could you confirm?
Yes.
Okay, so I talked a lot about many files, and I talked about the cleavages that we're seeing in the European Parliament or the Council. What we do here with our new platform, our new platform is eumatrix.eu. Now I'm going to give you an example. We're looking at the regulation of the pharma sector because you mentioned this. And we look at the positions of the members of the European Parliament across the dossiers, and we are positioning them in this matrix, in this way being able to provide the public or those using this matrix very accurate information with regard to where each member of the European Parliament stands. So whether they are more regulatory oriented, so they want stronger regulation, stricter regulation of the pharma, or whether they are more market approach, they want less FAR, they want the companies to be allowed to move more freely. As you can see, there is a very big diversity of positions here, positions, that is, views of the members of the European Parliament and the direction in which they're putting the legislation. But it is very, very important to know which of the parliamentarians have already decided in which direction they will vote and which amendments they would draft and support. You see some of them are the extreme right here or extreme left here. So there is no point in going to these MEPs. You already know the direction in which they will vote or which amendments they will support. But the ones in the middle here, they are the ones that decide which amendments to support based on last-minute negotiations. So we can already predict this. We're looking at their past behavior. We're looking whether they're more moderate or more radical in their positions. And we know who will make the difference in negotiation, especially at European level. The coalitions are made vote by vote. So it's not like a national level where you know that the parties that support the government will generally support also the proposals that come from the government. The European Parliament, these coalitions are made vote by vote. So it is very important for the stakeholders to know the position of each MEP as well as the level of influence. That's how we look at the information. We do this data analytics for the Parliament. This is the Parliament, but then we do the same for the governments. And that's how we suggest that people should be looking at information. You can see also the governments of all of the EU member states, the 27 of them, how supportive they are of a regulatory approach on pharma, so strict regulation, or a market approach, say no regulation or regulation that would support the expansion of the pharma sector. This can be about clinical trials, so let's say less difficult clinical trials, or stronger intellectual property rights or weaker intellectual property rights. This is what we are discussing. I'm not going to insist further, but you feel free to contact me if you want to discuss this in more detail. I think maybe I should take a break here, or I can also talk to you about what we can expect ahead of us, because this is the last year of this political cycle. We have the Spanish presidency coming ahead of us, and it's not clear who will steer the government in Madrid yet. It is likely that the EPP party there will take over the government, which will have an impact on the direction of the policies that Spain will push, so more market-oriented. But most importantly, we are heading towards European elections. And as I said, the Commission will come up with proposals all the way to the European elections. But the parliamentarians, on the other hand, will start spending much more time in their constituencies than in Brussels and Strasbourg, because many of them want to be re-elected. So it is very important to know what we can expect, how the next parliament is going to look like. We are making projections of the scores that the political families will get. Just in a few words, we are projecting that big political families like the EPP, the Socialists, and even Renew, so Renew/ALDE, the political family of Macron, will lose seats that will go to the, let's say, fringes, the conservatives and reformists, so to the right of the EPP and to the left of the Socialists. These will gain seats. What does that mean? It means that the next parliament is going to be more fragmented, more polarized. That means longer negotiations need to be conducted in order to reach compromises, because more people need to be brought on board to create majorities. Other than that, the council as well, because the council will be the one deciding on the president of the commission, the structure and the powers of each of the commissioners. The council as well is going to be very fragmented next year. We're going to have a very interesting situation in which probably the European People's Party will win the European elections, but will not control any of the big governments. The German government will be controlled by the Socialists, the French by Macron's Renew group, and the Italians by the conservatives and reformists. So that means that there is going to be a very tight balance of power between all of these political families. So they will have to reach compromises in which everyone is happy. That means, the fragmentation of power in the Commission and in the other institutions. That's what we are forecasting now. That also means a bit more unpredictability in the next political cycle, because you know how it is when you have to satisfy everyone. It means that you have to pay attention to a lot of views, and you don't really know where the compromise will be reached. It's not like at national level when you know the kind of government that you have for the next few years, and you know what they want, so you know what you can expect. In the case of the European institutions, however, things are getting ever more complicated and more unpredictable. That's why it's very important to have the right tools to keep an eye on these. I'll maybe stop here and take questions.
Yes, Doru, thank you very much. It's really interesting. This is what you just described about the political developments and the regulatory trends. I think that gives much more headache to professionals like the people here in this room, or more importantly for people who work in Brussels, having to engage with both political families for the Spanish presidency. We don't know which one will prevail. Having to engage with extremists from both sides, right and left. It's not the easiest thing in the world. So please, Tevi, let's make it short and simple, please. It's the end of the week.
Yes, and it's a Friday afternoon, so thank you very much, Andreas, and Doru, many thanks for this extremely insightful and very rich presentation of yours. Just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Tevi Joseph, and I'm a senior advisor for global policy at ISDA. ISDA is the International Association for Swaps and Derivatives, the biggest financial services trade organization in the world, headquartered in the US. I've spent more than 15 years in the EU public affairs sphere, and I believe that by now I have quite a solid understanding of what some people call the Brussels bubble, having spent I hope you can hear me better now.
Yeah.
So I was saying that, yes, by now I believe I have quite a solid understanding of what some people call the Brussels bubble, having spent more than 12 years in Brussels. So first of all, I believe that you gave a very interesting presentation at the micro level of the ongoing legislative agenda of the European institutions for the remaining of this year. But my questions would mostly focus on the macro perspective. And so first of all...
So, Stevi, is there any questions from the audience, first of all?
Yeah, let's check if the audience has any questions they would like to ask.
Okay. No, please
no,
go ahead.
If not, okay. So first question, Doru, as you know very well, in this year, once again, the EU is facing a multitude of interlinked crises. And I believe from a macro geopolitical and economic perspective, last year was defined by, as you said, the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the continuous COVID pandemic, prospects of economic stagflation, but also, I would add, the growing challenges of the confrontation of the West with China. So my question is whether you think that many of these risks are continuing into this year as well. And perhaps I would add that in my humble view, what we've seen is that this state of polycrisis in Europe ironically presents as many opportunities as it does risks. And Europe to date has managed to achieve some of its greatest advances in its history while being in crisis mode. Would you agree with that assessment?
No, I would say that I think that's obvious, and I would certainly confirm it. Whenever there are crises, there are risks and opportunities. What matters is who can adapt best and who can adapt the fastest and the best to the new situation. Because what does a crisis do? It changes the circumstances. It changes the cards on the table, and it is very important to read correctly how the new cards look like and how you can play with them. It's pointless to start complaining that you don't have the right cards or that the cards are not right. That won't take you anywhere. What's important is to understand, and that's what the public affairs professionals do now. They are the fastest to understand what new cards are about and to advise on how to play with them, where the opportunities are, and of course where the risks are, to try to avoid the risks, but also to capitalize on the opportunities. Indeed, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia has changed a lot of the dynamics. It accelerated some of the trends. I wouldn't say that it dramatically changed the direction, but it accelerated the speed of the direction, and that's the renationalization of some of the industry. That's what the EU wants to do now. It wants to be less dependent on other players, in particular China.
Strategic autonomy.
Yeah, it wants the strategic autonomy, wants to have shorter supply chains, to import as little as possible in terms of raw materials, for example, but also to renationalize production. That's why it's called reindustrialization of Europe, which, again, it's a challenge for those doing trade, but it's also an opportunity for those that are capable of taking advantage of these intentions of reindustrialization and producing in Europe, because there's also money that to do that. There is European money that has to go into that to be able to compete with other players. Now, whether these will change, doesn't look like these trends will change for the next few years, because the war in Ukraine doesn't seem to be going towards a conclusion in the immediate future, and even if it does, the threat there has already become so obvious that, has already made the European stakeholders come up with so many proposals that it's clear that there is a long-term view that the new geopolitical, let's say, situation will not change. As regards dealing with China in particular, there is some margin of maneuver there from what we are seeing. It's not, let's say, unique view on how to deal with that. Obviously, all of the stakeholders and the politicians know that there are many risks there and that one cannot completely isolate. That's why they changed a bit the narrative from decoupling to de-risking from China to be more realistic. Situation is different from country to country. Some countries are more dependent than others. So I think that will be one of the big debates of the next political cycle, how to interact with China in a way that keeps, Europeans safe, but also keeps the economy going. So that's indeed one of the key debates to pay attention to.
Tell us, Doru, please, how these people in this room can be, how you and your team, your services, your agency can be concretely of help for those people. Either they work either for affiliates of foreign multinational companies or for Greek companies. It's been now a long time that you've been based in Brussels. You know Brussels by heart, the Brussels bubble. How Vote Europe and yourself can concretely be of help for these people?
What we do is that we keep an eye on the legislative agenda. In particular, we know the big picture, but also the details. As you guys just said, we're following how the general proposals, so general direction is transforming to concrete legislation. But also within the legislation, we're also looking at where each of the governments and each of the members of the European Parliament are positioning themselves. So we can provide this very accurate mapping of what's going on, but also who are the influencers and in which direction they're trying to influence. And that may, be useful information for you to have. Of course, your main concern is the Greek government and the Greek members of the European Parliament. So
provided that you don't use pictures, photos of the MEPs, because in the past we have paid, as tobacco industry, we have made this very expensive. I don't know if you remember, during the TPD2, we were making mappings with pictures of the MEPs, and we saw it leaked in the media, and that did not make the MEPs happy. Good. A very, very short comment because we need to
Perhaps
close
a
the
clarification,
session. Yes.
if I may, and Doru, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but the name of your company is EU Matrix, right? And VoteWatch.eu is no longer operational, but it was co-founded back in 2009 indeed, and I believe that you're doing the same thing. You're using big political data to provide top political insights into EU politics. So obviously, that's of interest to everyone in this room, and we would like to thank you once again for this very interesting presentation, and hopefully we'll get the opportunity to see you in person in Brussels very soon.
Doru, thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. Next time, because I saw you like French cheese or wine, or German efficiency, or British, I don't know, diplomacy, I remember you need to find something about Greece. Now you should
I'll
complete
keep that in
your,
mind now that you
your
mentioned.
Panmare. Which one?
I'll keep that in mind. I'll probably, I don't know, refer to the cheese.
Ah, cheese, okay. Feta. Okay, good. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Λοιπόν, φίλες και φίλοι, η αλήθεια είναι ότι σας κουράσαμε από χθες. Όμως έπρεπε να γίνει αυτή η άσκηση. Η Τζούλια είπε, ωραία η συζήτηση, υπάρχουν και κάποιες παιδικές ασθένειες και μπορεί να κράτησε σε μάκρος η συζήτηση αυτή. Έχει καλοκαιριάσει κιόλας. Θέλω να απευθύνω εκ νέου τις ευχαριστίες μου. Δεν είναι απλώς ρητορικές, είναι ειλικρινείς και εγκάρδιες. Νομίζω ότι χάρη στη συμβολή όλων σας καταφέραμε μαζί να υλοποιήσουμε κάτι που όλοι συμφωνούμε έλειπε από το δημόσιο διάλογο στην Ελλάδα. Αφήνουμε τους άλλους να μιλούν και όταν μιλούν οι άλλοι για εμάς δεν είναι πάντοτε καλώς ενημερωμένοι και μπορεί να μην μιλούν καλά. Ήταν λοιπόν καιρός να πάρετε εσείς αυτή τη φορά τα πρωτεία του λόγου που θα έλεγε, κύριε Παπαγιαννίδη, ο φίλτατος Λευτέρης Κουσούλης. Πιστεύω ότι στο διήμερο αυτό βάλαμε αρκετά γιώτα που λέμε στη θέση τους. Ήταν μια πρώτη προσπάθεια, μια αρχή με τα θετικά και ενδεχομένως τις αδυναμίες της πρώτης φοράς. Όμως νομίζω ότι μπήκε μια καλή, μια στέρεη βάση για να συνεχιστεί αυτή η συζήτηση με νηφαλιότητα, με γνώση και χωρίς τα γνωστά κλισέ και στερεότυπα που οδηγούν σε ξύλινη γλώσσα, σε λαϊκισμούς και κορώνες μιας χρήσης για όποιους ενδιαφέρονται να τις αξιοποιούν. Θέλω να ευχαριστήσω για μια ακόμη φορά τις εταιρείες χορηγούς που στήριξαν ενθέρμως και ήταν και η πρώτη φορά, γι' αυτό για μας έχει ιδιαίτερη αξία, γιατί δείχνει εμπιστοσύνη σε αυτό το εγχείρημα. Δεν θα επαναλάβω, τις βλέπετε τις εταιρείες, τους χορηγούς επικοινωνίας για την υποστήριξη και την προβολή. Θέλω ειδικά να ευχαριστήσω τους εκλεκτούς συντονιστές των πάνελ για το χρόνο που αφιέρωσαν και τον συντονισμό που πραγματοποίησαν. Ραντεβού, θέλω να ελπίζω, στο δεύτερο AGORA Corporate Affairs Forum 2024. Καλό Σαββατοκύριακο.